On this episode of the program, Matthias Shapiro, Polymath, is back on the show. Been a minute since we talked to him. We have the duality of truth in this election because everybody gets to pick their own. What should you think about it and how should you process it? Plus, Obama just campaigned for Kamala. Clinton's on the way, and yet the Democrats are panicked in the blue wall. We get into all of it coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for October 11th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you here in Austin, Texas. Oh my God, we're over a third of the way through October already. The polls are starting to heat up. It's never been closer than it's ever been. We are barreling toward the end of this election season. And everybody's tight. Have you noticed this? We talked about this with Scrimshaw. Not a lot of bold takes, huh? Not a lot of, I'm going to bet 50,000 now. Not a lot of that. Not a lot of swagger. You know? A lot of people saying it's going to be tight. It's going to be close. Everybody go vote. We're going to talk during the update about the anxiety, high anxiety amongst the Democrats, worried that Kamala has maybe plateaued. Maybe she stalled. We'll explain where that's coming from, what they plan to do about it, and more. Before we get started, we're going to bring in Matthias Shapiro, Polymath. Been so long since we talked to him. I was so thrilled to chat it up with him again. Writes a great Substack, and we love Substack. Speaking of Substack, we are now off Patreon and on Substack. If you have not heard the news, please understand that if you would like to support the show, if you do support the show, then you are no longer going to be doing it on Patreon. You're going to be doing it on Substack. So that's very important because, number one, if you were on Patreon, you currently have a comped RSS feed for the next month. So whether or not you're going to follow us at Substack, that's fine. Take this no matter what. Just put that RSS feed into the podcatcher of your choice. Because the one that you had on Patreon is not going to work anymore. We're not posting any episodes there anymore. Now it's just going to be on Substack. So even if you just want the free episodes, that's a great way to do it. But this comped thing for you, it also gets the bonus episodes up until the election. So I want you to do that. The way you do it is by going either to Patreon, the most recent and final post on Patreon for now, has that link for you to get your custom RSS feed, or you can go to Substack, politics.com, takepoliticsseriously.com, whichever way you want to go there. You can search for politics. There is a post that says, welcome to politics. You click on get my RSS feed. Boom. Just that simple. Once you throw that in the podcatcher of your choice, there's that. Now, what we want to do while that's happening is you go ahead and move your payment information over. Make sure you continue to get the bonus podcast. Let me remind everybody that currently we are running a deal that's only going to last up until Halloween. And that is for $99, you get the whole year of PX3 Extra. One whole year of it. 150 episodes of PX3 for less than $100. That's going to last until Halloween. So, and by the way, I'm watching these numbers come in. We are about, let's see, where are we? 29.75% of moving everybody over. So about 30% of the way there. I'm thrilled. Thank you guys for doing that. We'd like to get a little higher. So the $99, that's what people are going for. They love it. By far, the biggest thing that people are purchasing is that $99 deal. So thank you guys for doing that. It is greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. If you would like to, please, again, we got like 70%. Some of y'all will drop off. That's fine. And it's fine. And also, by the way, we primarily do a free show. So enjoy the free show. But obviously, we love the people who support us. Okay, that's that. I'm going to have to do a little bit of shilling at the beginning of these episodes leading up to everything as we get that number just a scotch higher, just a scotch higher, just a scotch higher. But let's go ahead and start off right now and go to our friend, Matthias Shapiro, a.k.a. Polymath. Welcome back to the show for the first time in a while, Matt Shapiro, Polymath on Substack. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay. You know, I'm holding up. This election season is driving me a little batty, but I'm okay.
What of all the unprecedented events, what has been the most unprecedented from your perspective?
I was entirely unprepared. Like the Joe Biden dropping out of the race, was the one that completely shocked me because there's a group on Twitter they call themselves Team Nothing Ever Happens.
Yep.
And it's basically like for all of the everybody oh, if so and so wins and the economy's gonna crash, everybody's gonna die, and they're like nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens. And Joe Biden dropping out of the race felt like something happening, right? Because that's never happened. That actually has never happened, right? In the history of American politics.
Not that late. Yeah,
right.
without a reason, without a I always said that it was possible that it would happen, but the way that it would happen is Joe Biden comes out and says, "Hey, I got my physical back from my doctor. I have an elevated risk that I don't feel comfortable going another 4 years." There'd be some fig leaf. There'd be a medical diagnosis on top of it. That didn't happen. He was just the thing that obviously should have happened 6 months ago, I'm doing now. Whoops.
Right. I'm trying to think LBJ declined to run declined to run again.
To run again, but that was
primary.
The primaries weren't what they were now. They were still in existence, but they had really only gone 2 cycles of even being the touch of a thing. They were good dip your toe in the water stuff, but he that was way earlier. I mean, if you're to judge by that time frame, that was essentially him dropping out 2 years before the election because we didn't have the focus nationally on it. This is so late. And you're right. I think that's and the funny thing is that it happens right after a president almost gets his head blown off on live television, which is also something that's never happened.
That was a big deal. Yeah. I mean, that was, that was okay too.
Yeah.
Right. But that part caught me very flat-footed in terms of what do I expect, what do I think is happening. It also seems like the Democratic Party has struck me a great deal as risk averse in a lot of the things that they do, and that's not a very risk averse move. That is I thought it was a very risky move, and I was surprised that they would do it.
So I agree with you. It is a very risky move, but it is only a risky move that is risky because you've taken a million different risk-averse decisions to lead up to it.
Sure, right.
Sometimes you can hold off for so long, you make a mess of yourself, and it was very clear that if Joe Biden, it would do Joe Biden good to face a primary, to have somebody to have let people don't kill people in the crib like Dean Phillips or whatever and run their name through the mud. Just say, look, Ollie Oxenfree, you got some donors that want to feel their wild oats. Do you think that you can convince Mayor Pete to run? Go. Let's see if you can do it. Let's make the case. I think he probably would have come out on top. Maybe. Who knows? But at the very least, it would have been something where people could have gotten their yayas out a little bit. And then,
he also could have made the case that he was just having a bad night at that debate. Because he would have been up in front of people doing stuff.
Yes.
Right. And there have been a lot more examples of Joe Biden, the man standing up there in charge, speaking, making his case, so on and so forth. And then he's going to be like, I was super tired or whatever. But him, you just couldn't combine the part where he was staying so far out of the public eye and then coming into the public eye and doing what he did that debate night. So I think that was it was a very weird thing to see and very weird thing to process, because I had been saying since John Fetterman's debate where he couldn't remember things. That we need, the Democrats need to get Joe Biden out of there. He needs to not run for another thing because this is cruel, right?
Yes.
And John Fetterman seems to have recovered pretty well, but I thought dragging him through that election was the wrong decision, and I stand by that. A lot of people disagree with me because he ended up recovering pretty well, but I think at the time, knowing what we knew, seeing him as he was, you can't do that to a person. It's cruel.
It was very, very hard to watch, and Fetterman, I think, has acquitted himself very, very well. I think, depending on what happens in this election, if there is a vacuum of power in the Democratic Party, I do think that people like John Fetterman are going to probably fill at least a portion of that vacuum, whether it be in the Senate or in on a national level. But in that moment, it was really, really hard to watch because he, had just had a stroke. He was having a hard time processing words. He still does. He does a lot of interviews now, but you can still see that he's watching a teleprompter, a teletype thing as people are talking. But you're right. The Biden stuff was it was bad. But it brings me to what I really want to talk to you about. Because after that Biden moment, when he drops out, it was an oasis in a desert. And I can't remember any time like this in recent political memory, especially in the midst of an election. Everybody agreed on the facts. They agreed Donald Trump did better in the debate because Joe Biden's brains leaked out of his nose. They agreed that this is very damaging to Joe Biden's chances to be president. And there was then a reasonable strata of maybe we stick it out to he needs to leave right now. That there was, I think, impassioned and healthy debate where everybody understood the world in which they were discussing. And then as soon as Kamala comes in, or Joe Biden drops out, really, as soon as Joe Biden dropped out, and all of a sudden there's also pre-made Kamala signs, you're like, oh, okay, well, this was in the works for a little bit. At that point, we go back to the reality distortion field where everybody on the right has their own universe and everybody on the left has their own universe. And oftentimes things can just kind of bubble up in the center of it and it'll be viewed entirely different by both sides. You talked about this on your Substack about the VP debate. How have you experienced that?
It's been very strange because I don't know. Part of me feels like maybe this has always been this way, but another part of me is I've been watching politics fairly closely for about 12, 13 years, something like that, and a thing will happen. And you can see, it's almost like you can see people trying out interpretations of it especially on Twitter. They're like, what if I shove it this way? What if I shove it that way? Does this work? Who won? Did Waltz win or did Vance win? Right?
Yeah.
And so that that's the larger frame that someone wants to advance, right? And
Yeah.
then within that frame, you're like, well, he won because of this line, or because the other guy said that line, or and you see people starting to pepper the larger conversation with these theories to see which one sticks, right?
Yeah.
And so for a while, here's a great example. Okay, J.D. Vance is weird. This
Yes.
was like a thing people said for like 2 weeks, and it
'Cause of
stopped
Tim Walz.
working. So they stopped saying it, and nobody says it anymore because it wasn't working. And that's what I'm seeing every single time a thing happens, is that people are trying out these little narrative suggestions, trying to see which one sticks, and then when something gets traction, then like the whole group barrels ahead with it, right? And I think I see this a lot on the left because I incline a little bit more towards the right, so I'm definitely more skeptical. I think the right has been very susceptible to this with the Hurricane Helene. I think I pronounced that right. Helene response,
that's fine.
Right?
Yeah.
Where like there'll be these little stories that'll pop up, and people will jump onto it and be like, "This is what's really happening," and then you have to like it takes a cycle or two of actual reporting. And people on the ground saying, "This is happening. This isn't happening. This is happening, but it's complicated." But while that context gives you a deeper understanding of what's happening, that little narrative point has gone away. It's run off, and and a lot of people don't stick around for the context filling. They just they take that narrative point and they're like, "That's the truth."
That's it. The first little narrative point that comes out, and this happens all the time with politics, but it's also really damaging with stuff like disaster. And this is from my point of view as a journalist. Disaster reporting and war reporting are very similar in that you really can't trust anything. Rumors spread really, really fast. The people on the ground are the government, the authorities that are on the ground very often don't have the biggest incentive to tell you the truth. In the case of war, they're actively trying to win a war. They're willing to kill people on the other side to achieve their goal. So the truth is not going to rank really high there when you've already crossed that threshold. And then with disaster stuff, people do want to, it's kind of martial law. Like, we just need to get these people to this location. And so it's hard. You're not going to get a full comprehensive worldview of a disaster relief effort in the first few minutes. Like, sometimes in areas like Florida that constantly have hurricanes, you can see patterns, you can understand, like, okay, are these people staged? Like, that's a little bit easier. But when it's in non-traditional places like North Carolina, yes, I am sure, and there's been great reporting on how much misinformation's there, but also, I don't know how good FEMA's doing. I don't think anyone's going to know how good FEMA's doing until the residents of North Carolina tell us in the next few weeks, because right now they're digging out their entire lives.
Right. Oh, for sure. And and someone made a really good point about FEMA and their response and their communication, which is that if basically the easiest thing for them to do is to say no to everything, because they're in charge. And if they say yes and something bad happens, everyone's going to blame them for it. If they say no and nothing bad happens, then nobody's going to blame them for it. But if they say yes and something good happens, no one gives them credit for it.
No. Yeah.
Right? So, if they say yes and then Elon Musk flies in with 500 helicopters and helps everybody, everyone's going to be like, Elon Musk is the best. And nobody's going to be like, well, thank you, FEMA, for saying yes to that. Nobody says thank you to FEMA. Nobody says that. Anything. Right? And so they're stuck. They're a little bit stuck. The incentives are very bad for them.
Yeah. My sense is that if you are relying on FEMA to be first line decision makers, you're not going to have a great time. You really need local leaders, and I don't know if they're designed for that. To be totally honest with you, I think that they are more designed to be a backstop and a resource fire hose that's going to be directed by people that understand the local communities a lot better. And when you're dealing with areas that get hit by natural disasters all the time, again, Florida's a great example, then there's an immediate seamless pipeline with FEMA and the state of Florida. And that's why you don't really see a lot of controversy there. But in these non-traditional areas where, Ryan Macbeth on Substack, pointed out, he was talking to people at the National Guard, that there is a problem with FEMA reacting to locals in very rural areas. But it's not because they have any kind of nefarious plan. It's because a lot of the people from FEMA are from cities. They are people that are bureaucrats that work in places where bureaucrats live. They are now setting up these mobile areas. A real ass mountain man with an AR-15 rolls down to get something. That's a bit of a culture shock. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know if they're getting robbed or something like that. And so there has been a culture friction that does spread, right? Rumors spread. Does that mean that Joe Biden has a map of voting preferences and is saying no, starve them, feed them, Asheville, everything they want, the mountains? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. It's. I think the communication is a really tough situation out there, because a lot of the communication infrastructure is just and so you could have someone who's in one town and saying this is happening over here, and someone's in another town 30 miles away and there's well, it's not happening over here, and both people can be telling the truth,
the absolute truth.
They don't know what's going on 30 miles away, just because things are so bad out there. In terms of transportation and communication, it's just tragic, right? But I mean, back to your point about different realities, right? What you have with that 30-mile away town situation is that one person, one group, is the guy who said it's bad, he's telling the truth, and the other person's no, we need to focus on the other person who says that things are going great. And that we have a communication cascade on Twitter where all this stuff sort of pipes its way up, and becomes the narrative, right? And people end up with a narrative that has 100 anecdotes and it's been filtered through 1,000 people, that tells them that this is what's happening, and it's almost completely divorced from another narrative that's happening in other subgroups, right? And it's weird because I can see this happening on Twitter, but then I go to I'll end up looking at, let's say, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great for me as a separate group because most of my LinkedIn stuff is urban, pretty blue, very tech oriented, right? So that's that's a different subgroup. And then I'll look at what people are saying at my church or in my church is actually not a great example, but I have a small group of 20 people that meet, and they're much more sort of red, a little more rural, very conservative Christian group, and that's where I get okay, what do the normies think, right? What do the tech normies think, and what do my conservative Christian normies think? And those worlds are wildly out of sync. Wildly.
Yeah. It's crazy that, especially now, and partly I want to give the world a pass because now's the time, in my opinion, when we should be doing this. My problem is not everybody getting crazy and putting on their political tribal jerseys and hitting each other in October of a presidential election year. This is when we should be doing it. All the other months, I think we could probably tone it down. But now is, this is kind of like our purge. That people can get their yayas out. But even that, with that being said, it is fascinating how many times that I have conversations with people, and people often come to me because they look at me as somebody that is oh, well, if you think this is a big thing, then I'll believe it more. But it's never a hey, can I ask you about this? It's usually a,
sure.
So this is awful and everything's terrible, right? And like they don't know for sure, but the way that they've come into it is like the world is breaking, right? Right? The world is breaking,
isn't it?
Is it?
Right?
Is it?
Right. Right. Oh, yeah. Yes. Right. Like I'm really uncertain about stuff right now.
Yeah.
I don't know who's leading in this election at all. Like it would not surprise me. It would not surprise me to have Donald Trump win the Electoral College and lose the election. That's like, I'm like 50-50 on that's what's going to happen. It wouldn't surprise me if Donald Trump won the popular vote. It wouldn't surprise me if he lost the popular vote by 4%. Like that's a wide margin. I would not. We could go into election day and I could see Kamala Harris winning, Donald Trump winning, and either of them winning with a 4% popular vote. And that's unreal. That's
it's just every time that I see something that kind of makes me think like one way, I'm like, then I see something else. And it's like, so you have a lot of the election Twitter people are like, oh, this Washington primary. The Washington primary has been a good predictor of the national vote. And it looks like that's going to be anywhere between D+3, D+4. Oh, wow. Okay. So that's good. That's a reliable bellwether. Then Gallup comes out and they say, this is the most conservative electorate that we have ever seen. It is 3 points more conservative than George W. Bush, the last Republican to win the electoral vote. So this is historically America is tilting more conservative. And then I look at all these ads and I'm like, I sure do see a lot of Democrats that are running like Republicans. I don't see a whole lot of Democrats saying, here are the big liberal progressive things that we're going to bring to you. I see a lot of Democrats that are saying, we do need to build a wall. So it's like, if that's the case, and that's what they're saying, then what are they seeing? And then, you look at, I read a thing today that was like, all right, so take margins in the Rust Belt out. Only look at vote share. That polls have been stunningly accurate about Democratic vote share in the Rust Belt. And that hasn't changed. It just always underrated Trump's vote share. And now that would make the argument that this is close and Kamala Harris is leading in all those. And then I see Donald Trump put 107,000 people into a field because he got shot there 2 months ago. And it's like, all right, well, I have no idea. I have no clue. There's a million different signs that you can build an argument on top of.
There's a lot of stuff that's kind of going on underneath the national headlines. Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty around, like, I genuinely do not know what Kamala Harris's policies are about almost anything, right? Like, I had someone he was genuine in his belief that Kamala Harris is going to be a super hawk on Iran. Like, absolutely smart guy, absolutely rock solid belief. And I'm like, you feel confident about that? Because really? I don't feel confident about that at all. But he did. And there's so many big, impactful things, like things that are going to impact my actual life. Things like what's going to happen with school choice. Well, that's a second tier effect of what's happening in this election. And I'm not even convinced that the president, who's president, is going to impact that one as that much, but it might, right?
Yeah.
And there's questions about immigration and what's going to happen. Like, somebody, whoever wins, Kamala or Trump, is going to do something about immigration. I don't know what. I don't know what they're going to be able to do, but they're going to do something. And
something's going to happen.
It feels like we got all this uncertainty at the top line, but underneath it, there's like a lot of big stuff going on, and it feels like we just have to wait and find out what is going to happen with all that stuff, and that is, I don't know, like, I'm doing okay with that uncertainty because I've got 3 kids, and you can't like upend their lives. You want to hear the weird one? I don't know how this has happened, but my son, who is 9 years old, really wants Kamala Harris to win the presidency, and my daughter, who is 13, really doesn't. And I
really
don't know why on either of those things.
how that has filtered down to them, or
Like-
is it just the younger brother wanting to play opposite of the big sister?
That could be a part of it. But like, I think one of the only thing they've really seen. So we missed the Harris Trump debate as a family because my son's troop was going to a minor league baseball game. So we just went to the baseball game because I'm like, that's more important.
Yeah.
But they saw a bit of the Trump versus Biden debate, and all my kids they were like, yeah, let's get engaged in politics. I'm like, really? Okay. It's sort of like the gangster father who's like, no, I need a better world for my kids than this. And I'm like, don't look into politics.
Go straight, Sonny. Go straight.
Right. But they watched that, and their takeaway was these two guys are way too old.
Yeah.
And I think some of that was exacerbated by just how bad Biden looked during that debate. But Trump is a hard guy to follow. When he's speaking extemporaneously, it's hard to follow what he's saying.
Yeah.
I think, and certainly for my kids, right? Certainly, and so I think my son was had that experience. Was like, too old. Everybody's too old.
Everybody's too old.
Kamala Harris comes,
Younger.
he's like, she's not old.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, look, I do think that there's a part of that, and that was part of, I think, the Brat Summer euphoria on the Democratic side, was that you had a lot of Democrats and liberals in my life that at the darkest moments with Biden would say with true honesty in their heart and voices, I will vote for a corpse over Donald Trump. And I think that just taxed their soul. Like, it was just hard. It's hard to say that. It's hard to be like, my hatred for Donald Trump is so much that I will vote for a slab of meat over him. I don't care what it does to the country. I don't care what happens. I just hate this guy so much. And so it's like, to have Kamala, it was like, oh, now you're old. You're old, and you don't talk so good, and you need a nap. It was so exciting. It was just like all their vulnerabilities became strengths overnight.
And I think my Iran friend, one of my discussion with him was sort of like, you really think like Kamala's different than what we have now? I mean, she's in that administration. You think she's going to do something different? And he really did. He really does think that's it. And if you think that a Kamala Harris administration is different than a Joe Biden administration, I think people are desperate for something different. Something, whatever is happening now, I don't like it. Do something else. Right.
Well, that's the other argument for Trump to win, like, the popular vote, is that he's the challenger in a 60-30 change election, right? Only 30% of the population, so less than the Democratic vote share, says that the country's doing good.
Which is almost hilarious because he was already in office. So it's like, change back to that, though? Because we did already do that. Right? And so, like, it feels like in a normal election, you could have normal arguments, right?
Yes.
You could have, you would have an obvious change candidate, and you'd have an obvious stay the course candidate, and all of that stuff is jumbled together, and you can make the case for change with either candidate, and you could make the case for well, actually, things weren't so bad then. Things aren't so bad now. And it's I think that's contributing to that whole narrative confusion and multiple tiers of understanding about what's going on, and I think more than any election I've ever seen, people seem really self-conscious about the arguments they're making, where there's not as much people making an argument that they themselves believe, but they're making the argument that they think will convince someone else.
Yes.
And I'm struggling with that because I don't make arguments that I think will convince people. I make arguments that I believe.
This is your update, brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Leads you to our brand new Substack. I already gave you the whole spiel up top, so this will be the short version. 2 bonus episodes each and every week. They've never looked better. They've never sounded better. The app is pristine. It is awesome. It is phenomenal. We have a great community that also has the Substack chat. We've had a great time on there. Join the team. Head on over, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. And one more time, $99 for the entire year. 150 episodes of PX3 for less than $100. Come on, less than $1 an episode? You got to be out of your mind. Let's go to a clip.
And the reason some people think, wow, I don't know, I remember that economy when he first came in being pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good, because it was my economy. We had 75 straight months of job growth that I handed over to him. It wasn't something he did. I had spent 8 years cleaning up the mess that the Republicans had left me the last time. So just in case everybody has a hazy memory, he didn't do nothing except those big tax cuts.
That is Barack Obama stumping for Kamala Harris in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He had Bob Casey up there on stage. Let me just say this. We live in a very fortunate time period. We live at the peak of human civilization. We have so many luxuries that are given to us if you are, in the Western world. And let me just say this. We have been denied one tremendous pleasure. And that is we will never see Barack Obama run an actual campaign against Donald Trump and vice versa. Because I think they would both love to do it. I think Donald Trump believes he would run better against Obama than he would anyone else. And I think Obama believes that he would drub Trump, that he would boat race Trump by 10 points. They hate each other. They for real. Like there's like politics hatred. Boy, at least it would be great. Because when Obama goes after Trump, it's like it's good. Obama's good, right? He's a great orator. But, man, if it were just, I don't know. Trump goes after Obama all the time anyway. Here's the news. Former President Bill Clinton is joining the Harris campaign, focusing on key battleground states. This effort comes alongside Obama's appearance and further appearances over the weekend and the next few weeks, both aiming to secure swing state votes where the margins are tight. Clinton's appearances will target rural voters, a group Harris is increasingly courting, with stops in Georgia and possibly North Carolina. Oh, old Southern Bubba coming back. His strategy contrasts with Harris's larger rallies, opting for smaller local events. The campaign is hoping to both rally Democrats and attract disillusioned Trump voters in traditionally red areas as the election enters its final stage with high stakes in the Sun Belt and Blue Wall states. You want to know what? There was something that I noticed, which was that Obama was in a smaller venue, and for a second, I didn't realize that Kamala wasn't with him. He's doing his own events with Bob Casey. And I realized why now, just literally reading this copy. Because they don't want Obama outdrawing Kamala, which may well happen. Smart. Let's get into some anxiety. Right. Actually, you want to know what? I'm going to read this one first, and then we're going to get to the anxiety last. Kamala Harris's campaign is deploying Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to engage male voters, specifically young men. Walz will appear in a media blitz focused on football and hunting, including a pheasant hunt with influencers and an interview with Michael Strahan on Good Morning America. His appearances will target the swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. He is also going to give a pep talk to the high school team that he assistant coached back in the day. I think it's East Mankato in their game against West Mankato. Might have screwed up that. But it appears that a lot of this is the Harris campaign trying to make up for deficiencies, make up for men, and make up for rural voters. It doesn't appear that Walz has had a measurable difference with some of the union voters that they were initially trying to target. And it's causing a little consternation. This was from Axios' reporting. Vice President Harris faces growing challenges in key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which are critical for her path to victory. Despite a strong start, Harris's campaign appears to be stalling, with media efforts and spending not yielding significant gains. Polls show tight races, and new polls, by the way, return of the pole dance on the most recent bonus episode of PX3, showed Trump leading in Michigan and Wisconsin, while Harris does still, on aggregate, hold a slight lead in Pennsylvania. Democrats are concerned about her performance, particularly in Michigan, where union members and young men are drifting, and we've talked a lot about the Arab community there. With Election Day approaching, Harris's campaign is focusing heavily on these states, but top Democrats urge a more aggressive strategy. Among them, David Axelrod, who was a voice that was unafraid to criticize Joe Biden's campaign. He does not seem particularly afraid to criticize the Harris campaign. This is what he had to say to Axios. Harris has made steady and incremental progress in the 10 days after the September 10th debate, but now the race has plateaued. Axelrod added that Harris had a great launch right through the convention and the debate, but in these campaigns, every time you clear a bar, the bar gets raised. You have to lift your game and adjust your strategy. This led to a bunch of conversations about internal polls. And I would point you guys to a few different places to pay attention. Number one, Mark Halperin. We should reach out to Mark Halperin. I would love to talk to him. Mark Halperin, who wrote Game Change and Game Change 2, co-wrote it. Although I think now the two authors have split. You can see which one was really dedicated to reporting, and it's the one that was shadow banned into the Me Too realm, because the other guy just kind of became an analyst on television and doesn't really do reporting anymore. So he does a lot of the reporting. He has said that the two Senate campaigns of Michigan and Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin and Alyssa Slotkin, that their internal polling shows Harris down. I would encourage you, pay attention to him. Also, go read Nate Silver today. Nate Silver on Substack pointed out some of the pitfalls with relying on internal polling. Specifically, if internal polling shows you doing better. You know, he had apparently Mitt Romney's internal polls had Mitt Romney favored by like 5 points. So the campaign was just gaslighting themselves. But if they're saying, if these campaigns are saying, hey, Harris is dragging us down, you wonder what the reasoning would be if we are to take Halperin's reporting seriously. In the bonus episode of PX3 that came out on Thursday, we did also read some, our friend Claire Mignon is back in Dearborn, Michigan. She was texting me some of the things that people were saying, including one state Democratic politician who had some very pointed words for Kamala Harris. Also, Donald Trump in Detroit today met again with the mayor of Hamtramck. That is the more conservative, religious Muslim town that is next to Dearborn. He has endorsed Donald Trump and met with him again. And, you know, when you go into the Facebook post of that, where you have a lot of the residents of Hamtramck that are writing stuff in Arabic on that website, and you go hit translate, it's a lot of hooray Trump. The coalitions in this race are just absolutely bonkers and batty. You're going to need to keep up with it. Not only now, but for the crunch time of the election. And then afterward, this is going to be an election we're going to spend 6 months picking through. I'm going to go state by state. It's going to be insane. I'm not kidding here. Because of how weird this one is, the lessons we're going to learn from this race will inform political science for the next 100 years. And you're going to want that, right? For cheaper than it's ever been offered? Well, then you got to go. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Sign up, pay the annual price. That's $99 for the entire year. That price goes away on Halloween. Support the show. Support independent journalism. Thank you guys for everybody who has done it so far. We're at 29.75. Let's see where we're going to be in a week. And now, back to Matt. The Cheney thing. The Cheney thing has broke my brain. It is like, because I think we're around the same age, but like I came of age in college during the Bush administration, right? Yeah. I was in the most liberal enclave that I had ever been at the time. I've never really grown up in conservative areas, but even then, college is college, right? You have an entire institution that tends to lean very liberal. And George W. Bush, and more specifically, Dick Cheney, was the devil. The warlord that was tearing American society apart. And to have Liz Cheney up next to Kamala Harris while she's saying, and we're not going back. And it's like, to when? Not going back to when? Because you want to go back. You're talking about the compassionate conservatism of the 2000 Bush campaign. What is even happening right now?
Yeah. It's weird because that and RFK. RFK wrote a Rolling Stone article in 2005 about how Bush stole the election from John Kerry. Right? He was a radical leftist, and now he's he goes independent, and then he's promoting
Make America
Donald
healthy again.
Trump, right? And Matt Taibbi was what I would call I'm not sure I would call him a radical leftist, but he was left of left. When he was writing for, I think he was writing for Rolling Stone too.
Rolling Stone. I remember reading him when I was a broke New York kid. I was reading him in the New York Press. But he's always been to the left. Although I do think at the very least, whatever his polar opposites are, just wherever the Cheneys aren't. He seems to have fully rotated around magnetically as him and the Cheneys have kind of just switched sides.
Right. I have. And you might have some listeners that I have to beg apologies from, but I have always despised RFK because he's been anti-vax for things like childhood vaccinations, which I view as deeply, deeply important. And I've always disliked him. And so so him joining Donald Trump actually makes me less pro-Trump. I'm like, oh, you're gonna let that guy near you? Oh.
Yeah.
And so it's just part of this the weirdness of this election is
this coalition shifting is nuts, and that's going to be the big question. Is another thing that we don't know. How real is it? How real is how real is the coalition shifting? Because it's on one hand, you obviously have a lot of these suburbs that used to be tolerate the conservative elements on the social stuff, but I like the tax breaks more than I want a Democrat in office, so I'll vote Republican. Yeah. Now they're Democrats. The safety moms of 2004 are now wine moms. They are all in for Harris. That has continued to go. But Harris is talking about unrealized gains. Is that enough to get some of the more fiscally minded side to say, maybe not. Maybe Donald Trump's there. On the other side, you have these crazy numbers about Latino and black vote share that are eroding at a rapid rate, which is a major problem for the Democratic coalition as it's currently constituted. But is it real? We don't know. Right. That's only going to be a thing that once it actually falls apart. Right. Well, and the aftermath, if Harris loses, the aftermath is going to be out of control. Because there will be an instant narrative that we shouldn't have pushed Biden out, right? Or we should have had a primary or something the blame throwing is going to be unreal. You want to know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm going to ask every guest from here on out. We debuted this on the last episode. This is my 4 scenarios of how the election will end, and I'm just going to ask you what you would, if I'm giving you PX3 tokens like it's an arcade, you just have to put your token on one of them. All right?
Okay.
Here are my 4. Pax MAGA is the most rosy scenario for the Republicans. That is Trump winning, GOP Senate, GOP House. He takes all the swing states, and maybe we throw in a weird one like Virginia or something like that. Flips red that nobody was even looking at. Okay. One below that, and this is what you're talking about: Democratic Civil War. This is a Trump narrow win in the swing states, but he does pierce the blue wall. GOP Senate, but a Democratic House, enough to say, hey, the Democratic brand is not the problem. It's whatever was happening in the air at the top of the ticket that really, really caused the problem. We crossed the meridian line, unbound by what has been. This is a Harris win. GOP does take the Senate because they have a favorable map, and a Democratic House. That is, in my mind, the end of Trump in that it's like, okay, we've gone as far as this coalition is going to take us. We do need to start thinking about where we go from there and start to bring back some of the voters that have run away. And then the final one, Rose sends her regards. Blue skies for the blue team. Harris wins, and she picks off Florida or Texas or something like that. There's some just absolute insane result. Democratic Senate, because Colin Allred wins. You're able to keep all of your Senate seats in Montana and stuff like that. And then, of course, a Democratic House. So, of those 4, you don't have to say what you believe in. What do you think is the most likely?
I think the Harris winning the presidency and the GOP maintaining the Senate, that third one, I think that's the most likely. I also think that's probably the least healthy for the Republic, because a narrow win makes the Democrats look at this and be like, nothing's wrong. We did nothing wrong.
Went wrong. Everything was awesome.
We don't have to change anything. and I think it makes the Republicans be like, stolen election. And I think both parties do nothing. I think that one's the most likely, because that's the nothing ever happens.
The nothing never happens camp.
Nothing ever happens. I think Democratic Civil War would be healthy for the Democrats. I think they need.
I think they're due for it. The Republicans went through theirs 8 years ago.
Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, so I think that third one is the most likely one. I wouldn't. But a Trump win wouldn't surprise me a great deal. I just like. It's the funny thing. It sounds like you've thought through the consequences of it, and I'm just like too tired to think through the consequences of it. I'm just like, I don't know, man. I can't give that much brain share to that problem right now.
No, I know. Well, I mean, that's the big thing that I'm looking at is, I think, coalitionally, we don't know what voters these parties are going to be chasing, right? Because
this election will change that.
Yeah,
right? Like,
I was at both. I was at both conventions. The Democratic convention felt like the exact same Democratic convention that always happens. It's very, if even down to the fact that they were like, nobody get out of line. Everybody, they were restricting access to the press to the floor, especially later into the convention. I believe that they deliberately created their floor plan to make that happen because the Republicans had plenty of space on their floor. But the Republican one, night one, the top 2 speakers were Amber Rose and the head of the Teamsters. Mm-hmm. That ain't your dad's Republican Party, all right?
No,
the girl with the face tattoos that is most famous for dating Kanye West and Wiz Khalifa, and the head of the Teamsters talking about how the Chamber of Commerce is a pox upon America. Like, we're in a different coalitional world. If that's who you're talking to. We don't know. We have no idea where we're going to go, and I think that it's going to be fascinating to see. Although I'm kind of on your side. I think in general, the priors are always nothing ever happens. It's going to be 3%, maybe one way or another. Maybe that's enough to tip the election in Milwaukee and Detroit, but otherwise, it's the same as it ever was.
Yeah. I don't know, and I don't know, and I don't like, and I don't know what I want either, which is part of the problem. Like I mentioned my seething hatred for Robert F. Kennedy. If he's part of the Trump campaign, in order to move votes, okay, sure, fine. If he's part of the Trump campaign because Trump's like, I'm going to put you in charge of something, then I'm like, Robert F. Kennedy leaning on the FDA for stuff that's bad. That would be bad. I do not want that. The
one thing that would come back if Donald Trump gets a second non-consecutive term is firing people. The guy loves firing people, and if there's one thing that has not happened in this administration is anybody getting fired for anything. When you have when you have the Secretary of State Tony Blinken playing "Keep on Rockin' in the Free World" and bringing C-SPAN cameras to record him doing it while the Middle East and Europe are in flames, then you can't get fired. It's just impossible. There's no way to do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Trump, the consequences of Trump, I can think of bad ones, I can think of good ones. I think a good one would be I think would go scorched earth through Washington bureaucracies, DC bureaucracies. And I think they need that as well. I think that they have become so comfortable and smug in their own power that they need to be shaken and be told, look, what you are doing is not good for the American people. Change things. Yeah. And I don't see a Harris administration doing that at all. So I think I think that like I said, I think Harris is nothing ever happens, and it's every bureaucracy. Because this is effectively the first presidential election we've had since COVID. And because we were right smack in the middle of that during the last one, and so which no one's talking about and nobody cares about anymore. So
nobody really wants to revisit it. Like that's the thing. Is like Trump doesn't want to revisit. He doesn't want to remind anybody that it happened. He doesn't want to talk about the vaccines, and the Democrats want to just say Donald Trump COVID and then end the conversation because all their solutions that they wanted at the time are hilariously unpopular now and likely would have contributed to the economy being in a way worse place than it is. Like, if anything, Trump's aggressiveness on reopening is the reason why we have a better economy than Europe.
So, if you want, this is funny because, if you want to talk about, good things that came out of COVID, I'm actually really glad that Biden won in 2020 because you got to see what a Republican administration was going to do with a pandemic. And then the Democrats got their turn, and they didn't do very much. They didn't do any better, right? They made all the sorts. They came into the election smugly thinking, well, if we were in charge, we would have this thing licked. And then they got put in charge, and they got their butts handed to them on pandemic policy. And it's honestly I was actually at a talk at Emory University a couple of days ago. Between sort of a pro-COVID versus a pro-COVID pandemic measures versus anti-COVID pandemic measures. Yeah. That's kind of what it was being billed as. It was not that. It was really vocally anti-pandemic measures versus we made a lot of mistakes.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it was basically I told you those were mistakes at the time. You were right. Right. And it wasn't quite that stark, but it was I did not realize and talking with some of my friends on the follow up of that is the academic response to COVID is actually settling out way closer to the we shouldn't have done that side than we didn't go hard enough side. Way closer. And I think I don't think a lot of people know that. Because it's
I don't even want to think about it. It was to be totally honest, if we're trying to model the electorate's perspective, this is my biggest reason why I think there's a disconnect between liberal voters and conservative voters on January 6th. Strip out whatever you think Donald Trump should or shouldn't have done or blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. It's just that there is a large portion of America that just doesn't want to think about COVID. Not a lot good happened. They didn't like it. They would rather not think about it for the rest of their lives.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that. I still think about it because I have a lot of friends who still talk about it and think about it. But it's just been. I almost wish that we could I've been to a couple of events where they're having this debate, and it's so much more civil. Like in person, talking to people has become so much. It has become a real refreshing place to be for me because it doesn't look like the online fights. It looks like people sitting down and finding agreement, and and maybe that's only over COVID where the temperature has been turned down so much, right? Yeah. In addition to having more data to understand the effects of what was happened, nobody's fighting about it online.
Well, it's also out of fashion. So you have a lot of the clout chasers that were there because it gave them attention as a virtue signal that are gone. And really the only people that are talking now are people that are actually kind of studied on it, that really do want to talk about it, and also are not terrified that there's a bunch of people with pitchforks that are going to throw them at them like an anchor man if they say something that's wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, are you are you relieved to not be writing about COVID as your main source of a topic these days?
Yeah. I there are other things I'm trying to write about. I actually have a piece that I'm. Oh man, if I say this, I've got a 10-minute stop here. I'm writing a lot about AI, and I'm looking at AI stuff.
Oh, great!
And I've got a piece that is horrifying about it. It's basically there's an Apple AI commercial that basically has this girl can't remember this boy's name, and so she asks her phone.
I hate it. I hate it.
And I like they're like, look, you can do this. Isn't that great? I'm like, that was dystopian. That was the most
the fact that nobody can make that the two biggest companies that are buying ads for AI, Apple and Google, can't make an example that isn't sociopathic is damning on them. It is damning on them. I've said this on other places, and I'll get you out because I know you have to leave. But like my buddy Brian was doing a thing with his 11-year-old daughter where they were on the ChatGPT voice mode, and he was saying, hey, take us on a tour. Imagine that we are on the surface of Saturn. Tell us what's around us. Tell us how it feels, blah, blah, blah. And it went through, and they were like enraptured in this journey, this audio journey through the stars that they were able to interact with. Wholesome, heartwarming, a great example of the technology. It's not, I don't care about you. Can I feign human emotion at a quick enough glance that you'll believe that I'm an actual caring person? It's just so disturbing.
Oh, I think Microsoft had one that was basically like, you don't have to read that business plan. Have ChatGPT read it for you, and you can give a presentation that you don't know anything about. And I'm like, ah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Everybody, subscribe. I have been a fan of your work since the COVID stuff because I thought you had a really, really sober mind for it. I've been a fan of your political stuff since then, and I'm really excited to see you get into AI because that's also a place that I am very, very interested in.
It is a new world. It is a new world. I'm a technical guy, and so me getting into it isn't just like, let's read some articles. It's like digging down and writing the code to make it do stuff, and that is just, it is eye popping. We should talk about it sometime because it is so eye popping, and it threatens to remake a lot of our economy and a lot of how we see a lot of things. I can't, I've got to go pretty soon, and I can't start because I won't stop.
No, yeah, we will have you back on, and trust me, I got a long 8 months after this election, so there'll be plenty of time for us to chat about AI. Matthias Shapiro, thank you so much for coming on the show. Polymath, P-O-L-I math is where you find him on Substack. Thanks for coming back. Don't be a stranger next time.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Politics is written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. A huge thanks to Matt Shapiro, Polymath. Go to his Substack. Subscribe to his Substack. He's a great writer. He was telling me what he was, after we hung up, or after we stopped recording, he was telling me what he's going to write about with AI. That dude's just got a sharp mind. I just really like that guy's mind. And he's honest to his principles. That's something I really love, is that he is somebody who knows exactly where he is, and he's excited to share his view with others and excited to hear others tell their view, but he's not a drifter. He's not just drifting around ideologically. The dude has a center, and I really appreciate that. So go support him. Polymath on Substack. You'll be able to find a link to that in our show notes on Substack, takepoliticsseriously.com, because we have a lot better show notes now. It's a lot easier to do. Anyway, theyoungamerican@gmail.com is where you need to go if you want to send me an email. You can support us. TikTok, Justin R. Young. Instagram, Justin R. Young. X, Justin R. Young. YouTube, it is at politics. And our, the rest of our home is the Substack page. Take Politics Seriously. It looks good. If you haven't seen it, go see it. I know, I'm gushing, whatever. You can support us with a one-time donation. PayPal is paypal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3 Cash, and you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Again, that is Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Of course, you can only get our bonus podcast at the brand new TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Our $3 tier, which is now $12 a month. So the $3 tier is $12 a month. It's always going to be $12 a month from here on out. Gets you 2 bonus podcasts per week covering all the news we miss on our free podcasting schedule. And our Titanic $10 tier, which is billed annually now. So it's $480, but you do get your name read at the end of the show, like these fine folks in the brand new Titanic $10 tier. Scott, middle-aged Mike, Tom, Jeremy. Oh yeah, it's Adam. Chill, AB Puppy, Dr. Whiskey, Matthew, Michael, DP4 Bongo, Will, TC, Edwin, Andrew, Phil, Devon, Chris, Gloria Young, my mom, who I got her to subscribe back to the $10 tier while she was preparing for a Cat 5 hurricane. That's a Florida mom. That's a Florida mom right there. And Zombie Doc. Again, TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go if you want to support the show. We got great guests next week. Something I get from some of y'all. When are you going to have a real conservative on? When are you going to have a real conservative on? We got a real conservative coming on next week. We got J.D. Durkin. He's not the real conservative. J.D. Durkin back on the show to talk the economy and so much more. He's got a great new show that I was on that he's streaming everywhere. It's really, really well put together. He's a solid dude. That and so much more. We got some irons in the fire. We're figuring it out. Oh, yeah. Our narrative draft with Scrim and Ryan Jakubowski of YouTube. We're going to draft the narratives that are going to dominate this. We're going to put it together. It's going to be a great time. These shows are awesome. And I got a guest that's coming up, not next week, but the week after. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. Substack hooked that one up, too. It's the last time I'll say the S word. Till next time, have a great weekend. Everybody stay safe. It should be awesome out there. So, enjoy it. Enjoy the weather. This is your old pal, Justin Robert Young, saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, still more discuss politics. But this is the only one that dares discuss. 3.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show Audio.